So I'm back here at the British Museum, one of my favourite places in London. And I'm here because, well, Gladiator 2, it's hit the cinemas. Ancient Rome is back in the Hollywood spotlight. And I've been invited here to have a look at some very special Roman artefacts, all to do with the gladiators. I don't know what they are, but I can't wait to find out.
The Artefacts will be touring the UK in 2025 and 2026 as part of a new and exciting exhibition, Gladiators of Britain, which aims to reveal the popularity of gladiators throughout Roman society in Britain and beyond. I'm meeting curators Dr. Richard Hobbs and Dr. Anna Willi, who are going to show me the objects up close. I've been told the artefacts are of all shapes and sizes. First up is the smallest of the bunch, a very special Roman coin.
Anna, I mean, coins, they always seem so deceptive, don't they? You know, maybe at first glance they don't look that impressive, but the devil's in the detail. And this one, it looks astonishing. What is this coin?
It's a bronze coin, a sestertius, which should have been used, for example, when going grocery shopping, so it was a very common kind of coin. And this one shows the Colosseum on it, which is very special.
So that's the Colosseum right there that you
Yes.
can see. Wow.
The Colosseum was the single greatest and largest amphitheatre in the Roman Empire and features heavily in both gladiator movies. It's astonishing to see it depicted here in miniature on this Roman coin. Made of copper alloy, the coin has a diameter of 31 millimetres. That's bigger than any British coin today.
And I've got, just like for size comparison, I've got here an everyday 2p kind of copper coin. So it's just a little bit bigger, isn't it? But a bit thicker at the same time. And this was an everyday coin that many Romans would have had in their pockets or their arm purses or whatever when going down to the forum, the marketplace or wherever.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. And so, let's talk through some of the detail of this coin. So we've got the Colosseum in the middle, but so what can we see on the Colosseum? What have we got in the details here?
We see the Colosseum from the side, so we can see some of the front of the building with the arcades. So there are several levels. You can see arcades, and if you look very closely, you can see little statues in the arches as well.
God, I can't even see it, but you can see, you can 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of arches, to really emphasise the multi-storey nature of this building, and that's where the statues are shown.
Yes, there are three levels of arcades or arches, and then a top level. And a top level, in this case, you can see is where all of these little sticks are.
Just pointing out.
And these are poles, wooden poles that held the awnings that could have been put on a hot day. And they were operated by soldiers from the Roman fleet, by Roman Marines.
Well, how so? Why the soldiers?
Because it was like
putting up a sail, hoisting a sail.
So it's rigging basically for the awnings that you can see here.
I mean, that's so interesting because I remember I was in Pompeii recently and looking at some of the graffiti where it talks about gladiator shows, and one of the things to tempt people in was also saying, oh, we have awnings on the day as well.
Yeah.
So it's a funny kind of thing that we sometimes forget about with these great gladiatorial arenas, including the Colosseum, that one of the great attractions of going was the opportunity to sit in the shade during the day, during a hot day. So it's really interesting. You get like a depiction of that in the coin too.
Yeah.
And so what else can we see here? So we've got the Colosseum in the middle. Can we see the inside of the Colosseum too?
Yeah, you can see part of the arena, and you can see some of the ranks where people would have sat, the audience would have sat.
Right, yes.
And in the arena, you can actually see just about make out two gladiators fighting each other.
How can you see that? That's amazing. So, I can really you need a microscope only to really see it. So this is an actual gladiator fight happening, and this is what it's depicting, one in the middle of a fight.
Yes, exactly.
Around the side of the coin is its legend, containing titles of the emperor that issued it, Severus Alexander. These particular titles have revealed that the coin was minted in 223 AD.
Okay, 223 AD, so that's quite a bit of time after the Colosseum is built. I mean, why is a picture of the Colosseum put on an everyday Roman coin in 223 AD?
So this coin was issued by the Emperor Severus Alexander, and he issued it because he had done substantial repairs to the Colosseum and reopened it. It had been struck by lightning a few years earlier.
Struck by lightning?
Yes.
Wow.
During the reign of Macrinus, very short-lived reign of Macrinus. And he repaired it and reopened it and then issued this coin to commemorate this. And you can actually see the emperor, again, if you look very closely, one of the three figures standing next to the Colosseum is the emperor, and he's making some kind of sacrifice or offering, probably to give thanks for the building or to commemorate the inauguration or the reopening.
Why? I mean, how often do you see the Colosseum depicted on Roman coins? Why is this particular coin really, really interesting and significant?
It's not very often that we see this building on coins. There was one very similar one coined, issued when the Colosseum was first inaugurated in 80 AD by the Emperor Titus. And then at some later stages, when substantial works were done or repairs, as in the case of Severus Alexander, then they would issue similar coins again. But these are quite rare finds, actually.
Very few images of the Colosseum survive from Roman times, which makes this coin all the more fascinating. On its other side is the portrait of Severus Alexander wearing a laurel wreath. Severus was the last of the Severan dynasty. Regularly described as weak and controlled by his mother, his reign preceded decades of crisis in the Roman Empire.
I mean, he looks very young, doesn't he? Barely a teenager.
Yes, he was actually only 14 years old when his reign started, and he would have been probably 15 when this coin was issued.
Probably 15, wow.
He took over after his cousin was murdered, Elagabalus, who was also very young, actually.
And the writing, is that just the writing of his titles?
Yes, that's his name in this case.
So this must be really important if he's deciding to put on his coinage, which would be seen by many Romans presumably, that I guess one of his achievements, the reopening of the Colosseum, does that also hint at the continued, the real big importance of gladiators in Roman society to everyday life in ancient Rome?
Yes, it does. The Colosseum was actually originally 140 years earlier by Titus and even by his predecessor Vespasian, meant to be a gift to the public, a gift to the population of Rome. And the games that took place there, the gladiator games, were also a gift to the people as well. And Severus Alexander, by restoring the building and again opening it for the people, of course, puts himself in this tradition.
He's renewing the gift of gladiators to the
Yes.
people of Rome. Okay, Anna, this is slightly different to the coin we've had before. Much bigger, don't need a microscope. Much more shiny as well. What is this?
It's actually an oil lamp.
An oil lamp.
Yes, so oil lamps were used in antiquity to light domestic spaces, for example. And this one you can see at the front has a little hole where the wick would have sat. And in the back there's another hole to pour the oil in, to refill the
That's where they pour the oil in as well. And it's something we take for granted today, the fact that we have lights in every room at the, just a click of a switch or flick of a switch. Back then, were oil lamps like these, would there have been many of them in every house to ensure that they had light at night?
No, probably not. There would have been a few of these, and they could have been also carried around when you moved from one space to another, for example. So it's not something that everyone had dozens of in their house.
Beautifully preserved and astonishing to hold up close, the whole lamp is shaped like a gladiator's helmet. Specifically, a type of gladiator called a thrace, or Thracian.
You can see the visor in the front.
Yes.
And it would have had a grill. So this is represented by these little holes or dots. And then it has a broad rim, and on the top a crest, which ends in the face of a bird, maybe an eagle. And this lamp also has a hole at the top, so it could have been suspended as well as put on the surface.
So not just almost like the eye of the bird, it had a practical function as well, do we think?
Yes, I think actually the eye is just in front of the
Oh,
hole. Yeah.
my apologies. I thought that was the eye straight away. And I'm guessing most oil lamps wouldn't have been as elaborate as this. Was this just, do we think, for someone who just really liked gladiators and decided to get one in the shape of a gladiator helmet?
So we see these lamps from across the empire, but most of them don't have this nice green glaze. They are just terracotta lamps. But we think of them as a kind of souvenir or merchandise that was perhaps bought at the games and then brought home to remember this event. But this lamp is also interesting because of the glaze, which is a lead glaze, which is wasn't very widely used. So this has a hint of luxury to it as well. So it would have been probably quite a special item to its owner.
The oil lamp was made in Cologne on the River Rhine. Cologne was founded by the Romans 2,000 years ago and became a thriving city at the edge of the empire, home to artisans of all trades, presumably including those who created special gladiator souvenirs like this oil lamp.
So they were locally produced to commemorate the games that happened in the provinces as well. This one in particular was found in a sarcophagus. That again points to the fact that this was probably a special item because it was given into the grave of the deceased.
But it's also interesting, so we've gone from the coin, showing like the Colosseum in the heart of the Roman Empire, to Cologne. Gladiators were a big thing for the people.
Yes, I think so, but also this has an interesting connection to Rome itself because in Cologne was the base of the Roman fleet on the Rhine, the Classis Germanica. And we know that soldiers of the Roman fleet were involved in operating the awnings in the Colosseum.
It's the marine link we can kind of bring between the coin and the camera. I mean, it is such a stunning object. How old do we think this is?
It was made around 200 AD.
200 AD, it's almost 2,000 years old, and yet it almost looks brand new. It has survived in such astonishing condition.
Yes.
Next up, Anna's colleague Dr. Richard Hobbs is going to show me two items that were discovered a little closer to home.
So Richard, this little figurine here, are we moving on to gladiators in Roman Britain now?
Yes, because this was found in Colchester.
Colchester.
Which was the most important town in early Roman Britain. It was found in the late 19th century, so unfortunately we don't know very much about him. But obviously a lot of material has been found in different places, and a lot of our collections come from that period. And often we don't have a great deal of information, but luckily we do at least know it's Colchester, and that helps quite a lot.
Colchester, which was known to the Romans as Colonia Claudia Victricensis, was an incredibly symbolic town for the Romans. It was the first official Roman colony in Britain, and for a time it also served as the capital of Roman Britannia. Colchester was soon adorned with many great Roman monuments, including, almost certainly, an amphitheatre, although archaeologists have yet to find it. Several gladiator artefacts have been found beneath Colchester, including this small figurine. And what strikes you immediately about it is its white colour. This little figurine was carved out of bone.
We don't know exactly what type of bone, but it's beautifully carved, and it's a figurine, although it might, we don't know for certain, it may be part of the handle of an object, possibly a knife, but again it's not quite clear. The reason we say that is it resembles a lot of the handles that we get from known knives, so it would have had a metal component, of course.
And what are the details that we can see on this particular gladiator? I must admit, I'm drawn to that shield, first of all.
On the shield itself, there is a gladiator combat in progress where you see the figure of the gladiator defeating his opponent.
So this is almost Inception. This is the gladiator of the gladiator.
Well, exactly, yeah. And that is interesting because in his other hand, we're not sure, he might be holding a palm frond, and that would be the symbol of victory.
Right.
On the other hand, though, he might just be holding a short sword, the gladius, because that's what they used. And in fact, the word gladiator comes from gladius, these short swords that have got a blade on both sides. So he might be holding that. But on the other hand, again, sort of jumping back to the idea of it being a palm frond, you'll notice that he has a dagger in his belt.
Look at that, yeah.
He's wearing a helmet with a visor, and he's of the Murmillo class of gladiator. Basically, gladiatorial combat normally sets up a heavily armed opponent versus a lighter, more agile one.
They like that contrast,
They
don't
like
they,
that
in
contrast.
the shows?
They like that contrast in the shows. And so he would have been in the more heavily armed class. Usually they would have a breastplate. There's no obvious sign of a breastplate, interestingly. He'd have had a protective greave on his leg, and he'd have had a protective, what's called a manica on his arm.
Yes, arm manica, yes, yeah.
To protect the arm as he fights.
And it looks kind of like a decorated belt there as well, and a small loincloth.
Yes, he's wearing a loincloth, thankfully, and the belt is obviously to hold the weapon.
So interesting. So if you think this, potentially the handle of a knife or something like that. So that kind of object. And then you have a depiction of a gladiator for the hilt.
Yeah.
Do you think that once again shows how, like, in Colchester, gladiators were potentially like a big part of Roman life there? Yeah,
I mean, there's not a huge amount of evidence for gladiators in Britain, but clearly there were gladiators here. And so, yeah, I mean, when Britain became part of an empire, it brought with it all those things that we associate with Rome, the games being part of that.
More than 10 Roman amphitheatres have so far been discovered across Britain. Combine that with artefacts like this figurine, and the evidence for gladiators in Britain is pretty unequivocal. But this evidence, well, it isn't just depictions of gladiators and building remains. There's also this.
This is extraordinary. It feels like the main event.
Yeah, so this is a helmet, fairly obviously, and we believe it's the only certain piece of surviving gladiatorial equipment from Britain.
From Britain?
I mean, we can't be completely certain it's a gladiator's helmet, but there are many features of it which would suggest that it probably is. So it compares quite well with some of the helmets discovered in Pompeii, the best surviving set of gladiatorial equipment, obviously surviving because of the eruption of Vesuvius in AD 79 and so on. And the other thing to say is that the style of the helmet, with this very broad neck guard.
Yes, look at that, yeah.
And you've also got this brow ridge guard on the front as
front,
well,
yeah.
rim guards. And also the rivet holes at the front, they match well with the placing of a visor, so how the visor would have hung, and also the eye, they would have had these sort of eye protectors on the visor as well. So for all those reasons, we're fairly confident it is a gladiator's helmet. It would have been worn by provocateur type gladiator. This is one of the more heavily armed types.
It feels suitable for a helmet like this, doesn't it?
Yeah, it weighs about 2.5 kilos,
right,
which is quite heavy. Having said that, the ones from Pompeii on average are 4 kilograms, so they're even heavier. That's probably because they are also embossed. They often have these very elaborate, embossing with various things. This doesn't have that. It's fairly plain. And the armour that this type of gladiator would have worn, he would have worn a helmet like this. He'd have had a gladius,
so the short sword,
sword, a shield, a leg protector, and an arm protector.
And a manica, yes.
And normally they're pitted against each other. Unusually, it's normally one against the other. So it would have been a fairly evenly balanced fight between two quite heavily armed gladiators.
This helmet is an extraordinary relic of Roman Britain. It's incredible to look upon it today and to think about who might have worn it into the arena. But as impressive as it is, it's nothing compared to how it originally looked. Gladiator fights were shows, with fighters adorned with highly decorated equipment, and that included their helmets.
What do we know about the metal, the whole composition of this helmet?
Okay, so interestingly, we've actually only fairly recently looked at this, the metallic composition of this. The metal is very interesting because it's actually brass. Now that basically means it's an alloy of copper with lots of zinc, and it gives a very bright, shiny, golden appearance.
Okay, yes.
But the interesting thing too is that this helmet has evidence of tinning. So this is basically tin put on a surface. So I think we can't be certain, but I think what they're trying to do is give an idea of something that looks like it's gold and silver.
So it's silver. So the tin is kind of reflecting that
exactly.
silver colour.
So it would have been very bright and shiny. Obviously, these combats happen during the day, so hopefully, if you get a nice bright sunny day, you're going to get a lot of reflection. So it's clearly they've clearly chosen those metals for that reason. The other thing to mention is that the particular composition matches very closely to coin composition for brass coins of the early Roman period.
Okay.
So the other thing we can say is, and again we can't be certain, but this probably dates from the conquest period.
Interesting.
So that's from roughly AD 43 to the beginning of the Flavian period, so up to about 69. So we're looking at that period when this has come into Britain. Also, it's not likely to have been made here.
Right, so it's imported into Britain. It's brought with the Romans here.
It's brought in with the Romans here.
The helmet was discovered in 1965 near the village of Hawkedon in Suffolk, when a farmer struck this object as he was ploughing one of his fields. The separate brow guard was not recognised at the time, and it was only in 2001 that it was reunited with the helmet. If this helmet does date to the early Roman period, then it's almost 2,000 years old.
So Suffolk, potentially early Roman period, brought with the Romans. So could this be something like Colchester, one of those kind of nodes of Romanness at that time?
It could be. I mean, it's a nice thing to think. I mean, it probably hadn't travelled too far from its original place of use. So Colchester is a good option. Maybe London. I mean, London has the amphitheatre underneath the Guildhall.
Yes, it was originally made of wood, wasn't it?
That's right.
Amphitheatre,
Very sizable, 100 metres in length, could seat 7,000 spectators. So it might be London. Given where it's discovered and given its date, we're talking the conquest period. As we know, in AD 60, we have the revolt by Boudicca, who leads a revolt against Roman occupation. It might possibly have been looted from Colchester at that point, or perhaps even London. We know that Boudicca's forces attacked both places. Aside from that, we can only really speculate as to its kind of life use, really.
But this is such a fascinating example. I know, as you said, it's not 100% certain if it is a gladiator helmet, but you've got that evidence from Pompeii and places to bring into this. I mean, if it is, this is one of the best archaeological discoveries ever made for gladiators in Roman
absolutely,
Britain.
and it may be that we never find another piece of equipment like it. It's very important in that sense, and it's fantastic that we have it here in the British Museum,
and that you're still doing to this day more research about it,
exactly,
so learning more about it.
And this kind of this method of looking at these metals in fine detail is really improving greatly what we understand about these objects, where they might have been found, because the trace elements can tell us about signatures of the metal composition, and therefore you can start to build up patterns about what British metal work looks like in comparison to stuff made elsewhere. So that's why we think this was probably made on the continent and imported. So that tells us about a journey, and journeys are so important, of course, in the ancient world.
It is an amazing object, and I'm so grateful that you've been able to take it out and show me right here today.
I'm very happy to be able to do so.
These fascinating artefacts are just a few of the showstoppers that will be touring the UK in a brand new exhibition between January 2025 and April 2026, Gladiators of Britain. You can find out more about it and where it will be showing on the British Museum's website.